Section 46 of Gray's Anatomy, Part 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bologna Times. Anatomy of the Human Body, Part 2, by Henry Gray. The Muscles and Fascia of the Forearm. The muscles and fascia of the forearm. Antebrachial fascia, fascia antebrachii, deep fascia of the forearm. The antebrachial fascia, continuous above with the brachial fascia, is a dense membranous investment, which forms a general sheath for the muscles in this region. It is attached behind to the olecranon and dorsal border of the ulna, and gives off from its deep surface numerous intermuscular septa which enclose each muscle separately. Over the flexor tendons, as they approach the wrist, it is especially thickened, and forms the volar carpal ligament. This is continuous with the transverse carpal ligament, and forms a sheath for the tendon of the palmaris longus, which passes over the transverse carpal ligament to be inserted into the palmar aponeurosis. Behind, near the wrist joint, it is thickened by the addition of many transverse fibers, and forms the dorsal carpal ligament. It is much thicker on the dorsal than on the volar surface, and at the lower than at the upper part of the forearm, and is strengthened above by tendinous fibers derived by the biceps brachii in front, and from the triceps brachii behind. It gives origin to muscular fibers, especially at the upper part of the medial and lateral sides of the forearm, and forms the boundaries of a series of cone-shaped cavities in which the muscles are contained. Besides the vertical septa separating the individual muscles, transverse septa are given off both on the volar and dorsal surfaces of the forearm, separating the deep from the superficial layers of muscles. Apertures exist in the fascia for the passage of vessels and nerves. One of these apertures, of large size, situated at the front of the elbow, serves for the passage of a communicating branch between the superficial and deep veins. The antebrachial or forearm muscles may be divided into a volar and a dorsal group. The volar antebrachial muscles. These muscles are divided for convenience of description into two groups, superficial and deep. The superficial group: pronator teres, palmaris longus, flexor carpi radialis, flexor carpi ulnaris, flexor digitorum sublimis. The muscles of this group take origin from the media epicondyle of the humerus by a common tendon. They receive additional fibers from the deep fascia of the forearm near the elbow, and from the septa which pass from this fascia between the individual muscles. The pronator teres has two heads of origin, humeral and ulnar. The humeral head, the larger and more superficial, arises immediately above the medial epicondyle and from the tendon common to the origin of the other muscles, also from the intermuscular septum between it and the flexor carpi radialis, and from the antebrachial fascia. The ulnar head is a thin fasciculus which arises from the medial side of the coronoid process of the ulna, and joins the preceding at an acute angle. The median nerve enters the forearm between the two heads of the muscle, and is separated from the ulnar artery by the ulnar head. The muscle passes obliquely across the forearm, and ends in a flat tendon, which is inserted into a rough impression at the middle of the lateral surface of the body of the radius. The lateral border of the muscle forms the medial boundary of a triangular hollow situated in front of the elbow joint and containing the brachial artery, median nerve, and tendon of the biceps brachii. Variations: absence of ulnar head, additional slips from the medial intermuscular septum from the biceps and from the brachialis anticus occasionally occur. The flexor carpi radialis lies on the medial side of the preceding muscle. It arises from the medial epicondyle by the common tendon, from the fascia of the forearm, and from the intermuscular septa between it and the pronator teres laterally, the palmaris longus medially, and the flexor digitorum sublimis beneath. Slender and aponeurotic in structure at its commencement, it increases in size and ends in a tendon which forms rather more than the lower half of its length. This tendon passes through a canal in the lateral part of the transverse carpal ligament and runs through a groove on the greater multangular bone. The groove is converted into a canal by fibrous tissue, and lined by a mucous sheath. The tendon is inserted into the base of the second metacarpal bone, and sends a slip to the base of the third metacarpal bone. The radial artery in the lower part of the forearm lies between the tendon and this muscle and the brachioradialis. Variations: slips from the tendon of the biceps, the lacertus fibrosus, the coronoid, and the radius have been found. Its insertion often varies and may be mostly into the annular ligament, the trapezium, or the fourth metacarpal as well as the second or third. The muscle may be absent. The palmaris longus is a slender fusiform muscle lying on the medial side of the preceding. It arises from the medial epicondyle of the humerus by the common tendon, from the intermuscular septa between it and the adjacent muscles, and from the antebrachial fascia. It ends in a slender, flattened tendon which passes over the upper part of the transverse carpal ligament and is inserted into the central part of the transverse carpal ligament and lower part of the palmar aponeurosis, frequently sending a tendinous slip to the short muscles of the thumb. Variations: one of the most variable muscles in the body. This muscle is often absent about 10% and is subject to many variations. It may be tendinous above and muscular below, or it may be muscular in the center with a tendon above and below, or it may be present two muscular bundles with a central tendon, or finally it may consist solely of a tendinous band. The muscle may be double. Slips of origin from the coronoid process or from the radius have been seen. Partial or complete insertion into the fascia of the forearm, into the tendon of the flexor carpi ulnaris and pisiform bone, into the navicular, and into the muscles of the little finger have been observed. The flexor carpi ulnaris lies along the ulnar side of the forearm. It arises by two heads, humeral and ulnar, connected by a tendinous arch, beneath which the ulnar nerve and posterior ulnar recurrent artery pass. The humeral head arises from the media epicondyle of the humerus by the common tendon. The ulnar head arises from the medial margin of the olecranon and from the upper two-thirds of the dorsal border of the ulna by an aponeurosis common to it and the extensor carpi ulnaris and flexor digitorum profundus, and from the intermuscular septum between it and the flexor digitorum sublimis. The fibers end in a tendon which occupies the anterior part of the lower half of the muscle and is inserted into the pisiform bone. It is prolonged from this to the hamate and fifth metacarpal bones by the pisohamate and pisometacarpal ligaments.